Breaking Bad Season 4 opens with a tense, nerve-wracking scene that immediately establishes the Season-5's dark tone. The episode picks up from the shocking events of Season 3's finale, as Gus Fring demonstrates his lethal authority by executing Victor in front of Walter and Jesse with a box cutter, leaving them traumatized and fearful. This act underscores the Season-5's central theme. Power in the criminal world is absolute, and missteps carry immediate, often fatal consequences. Walter begins the season both terrified and strategically calculating, realizing that he must navigate Gus's dominance without losing his position or endangering Jesse. Jesse, already emotionally vulnerable from past losses, is further shaken by Victoria's death, forcing him to confront the terrifying reality of the criminal empire they inhabit. The episode sets the stage for the season-long psychological chess game between Gus and Walter, illustrating that intelligence, patience, and ruthlessness are equally important for survival. Walter starts asserting his independence subtly, purchasing a .38 caliber revolver as a means of protection and as a symbol of empowerment. The episode highlights Walter's growing sense of agency and his willingness to embrace more aggressive, calculated methods to protect himself and Jesse. Jesse, still recovering from trauma, begins to display signs of frustration and restlessness, hinting at his eventual evolution into a more decisive player. Meanwhile, the tension between Walter and Gus continues to simmer, emphasizing the precarious balance of power. Gus's calm, methodical approach contrasts sharply with Walter's blend of intelligence and impulsivity. Gus's calm, methodical approach contrasts sharply with Walter's blend of intelligence and impulsivity. The episode explores themes of fear, control, and preemptive aggression, suggesting that in the criminal underworld, survival requires both careful planning and the readiness to act decisively when necessary. Skylar's narrative grows in importance as she attempts to expand her control over the family's finances and navigate her moral compromise. Her subplot highlights the domestic repercussions of Walter's criminal activities and shows how deception and secrecy corrode personal relationships. Walter becomes increasingly obsessed with controlling the situation with Gus while maintaining his family affection, demonstrating the tension between his dual lives. Jesse's involvement in the meth operation grows, though his internal struggle continues, illustrating the psychological toll of navigating fear, loyalty, and ethical ambiguity. The episode subtly emphasizes that power is not only external but also psychological, affecting the ways characters manipulate, deceive, and strategize in both domestic and criminal spheres. In this complex world, even the most powerful players can be brought down by their own flaws and weaknesses. A ruthless tech mogul will stop at nothing to maintain her grip on the city's underworld. Meanwhile, a group of powerful figures are secretly manipulating events from behind the scenes. But as the stakes grow higher, alliances will be tested and loyalties will be broken. In this world of power and deception, only the strongest will survive. Episode 4A Bullet Points. Walter begins laying the groundwork for his eventual confrontation with Gus, manipulating situations to increase his leverage while keeping Jesse aligned with his plans. Jesse's trajectory reflects both vulnerability and potential for assertiveness as he grapples with fear, guilt, and loyalty. Gus's calculated patience is evident as he continues to manage both men with precision, showing that subtle manipulation and psychological control can be as lethal as physical violence. The episode reinforces the Season-5's core tension. Walter must balance intellect, courage, and moral compromise to survive and ultimately outmaneuver Gus. This episode deepens the exploration of power, strategy, and morality. Walter and Jesse's meth operation continues under Gus's supervision, with tension mounting as Walter grows increasingly aware of Gus's intentions to replace him. Jesse begins to assert more independence, but his moral and emotional struggles prevent him from fully seizing control. The episode also showcases Walter's growing cunning as he begins to formulate subtle plans to manipulate events to his advantage. The episode also showcases Walter's growing cunning as he begins to formulate subtle plans to manipulate events to his advantage. The juxtaposition of Walter's calculated risk-taking and Goose's patient, omniscient oversight creates a tense dynamic, emphasizing that survival in this world depends on both strategic foresight and adaptability. Walter's transformation into Heisenberg becomes more pronounced in this episode as he publicly asserts his power and defies Gus indirectly. The confrontation with Skylar regarding the money laundering business highlights the personal cost of his dual life, showing how ambition and pride affect both family and criminal dynamics. Jesse continues to navigate fear and loyalty, slowly building the confidence to act decisively in critical moments as the tension between Walter and Gus escalates. The tension between Walter and Gus escalates, illustrating that psychological dominance and strategic manipulation are central to survival, as the stakes grow higher and the consequences of failure become more dire. Themes of pride, fear, and calculated aggression dominate, setting the stage for the explosive confrontations to come. Jesse struggles with guilt and identity as he attempts to reconcile his role in Galia's murder and his growing partnership with Walter. The episode emphasizes the emotional and moral weight of their criminal choices, highlighting the cost of ambition and survival. Walter, increasingly confident in his manipulations, begins to orchestrate events that put him in direct opposition to Gus. Skylar's subplot continues to show the domestic consequences of Walter's actions, reinforcing the Series recurring theme: personal ambition and secrecy corrode relationships and morality. The episode balances psychological tension with narrative momentum, keeping viewers acutely aware of the stakes involved. Walter and Jesse's precarious positions are contrasted with Goose's strategic patience, highlighting the intellectual chess game at the center of the season. Jesse begins to gain clarity on his role within the operation, while Walter's manipulative skills reach new levels of sophistication. Gus controls the organization, Walter seeks to control outcomes, and Jesse struggles to control his conscience. The careful exposition and character development deepen the audience's understanding of the stakes and the psychological intensity of the season. Analyze and divide. Analyze the entire script to understand the narrative arc. Suggest transitions. For each scene, specify a cinematic transition type. Scene length. Aim for short, fast-paced, and impactful scenes. You must process the script sequentially. Each subsequent scene's subtitles must continue exactly where the previous scene's text ended. There must be zero gaps, zero omissions, and zero alterations. Walter's paranoia reaches new heights as he suspects that Gus has placed a bug in his car, symbolizing the lack of privacy and the constant surveillance in the criminal world. This episode underscores themes of trust, deception, and psychological pressure, showing how fear and suspicion influence decision-making. Jesse begins to recognize the depth of Gus's control, and Walter's strategic thinking becomes increasingly aggressive as he plans ways to undermine Gus. The tension between intellect, fear, and morality is heightened, illustrating that survival depends not just on intelligence, but also on understanding human behavior and anticipating threats. Jesse takes a central role in this episode as he travels to Mexico with Gus and Mike to handle the cartel's meth distribution problem. Jesse's resourcefulness and courage are highlighted, showing significant growth in his character and signaling his emergence as a more capable, decisive player. Walter remains in Albuquerque, manipulating events from a distance and observing the power dynamics at play. The episode juxtaposes Jesse's personal growth with Walter's strategic planning, emphasizing that survival and influence in the criminal world require both emotional intelligence and tactical skill. The tension between loyalty, fear, and opportunity remains a central theme. One of the most psychologically intense episodes of the series, Crawl Space, shows Walter's mental state deteriorating under pressure as his plans begin to spiral out of control. Skylar's moral compromises, Walter's desperation, and Jesse's loyalty all collide in a tense, suspenseful narrative. Walter's desperation and Jesse's loyalty all collide in a tense, suspenseful narrative. Jesse's loyalty all collide in a tense, suspenseful narrative. The famous final scene, where Walter laughs maniacally in the crawl space, surrounded by money yet aware of imminent danger, symbolizes the duality of his transformation. He has achieved power, but at enormous personal and moral cost. This episode exemplifies the interplay between tension, dark humor, and psychological complexity that defines the series. This episode exemplifies the interplay between tension, dark humor, and psychological complexity that defines the series. This episode exemplifies the interplay between tension, dark humor, and psychological complexity that defines the series. This episode exemplifies the interplay between tension, dark humor, and psychological complexity that defines the series. This episode exemplifies the interplay between tension, dark humor, and psychological complexity that defines the series. Episode 12, A.N. Timesa. Walter and Jesse confront the immediate threat posed by Gus as he becomes increasingly aggressive in asserting control. The episode heightens suspense and emphasizes the deadly stakes of their situation. Jesse's relationship with Walter becomes more complex, mixing loyalty, fear, and strategic alignment, while Walter's manipulations escalate in sophistication and moral ambiguity. Walter's manipulations escalate in sophistication and moral ambiguity. The episode builds to a climax that sets up the final confrontation of the season, showcasing the interplay of intellect, courage, and ruthlessness required to survive the criminal world. Episode 13, A Face Off. Of the season finale delivers a shocking, masterfully orchestrated conclusion. His strategic brilliance and moral detachment converge in an act of total control over life, death, and consequence. While the domestic fallout with Skylar remains a looming concern, as Hector Salamanca's wheelchair bomb is set in motion, Walter's strategic brilliance pays off, and Gus Fring meets his demise. The finale balances suspense, drama, and resolution, perfectly encapsulating the Season-5's central themes: power, pride, morality, and the consequences